Chapter. I'm a former business owner of a lacrosse stick stringing company, and I'm currently employed as a data analyst at a fintech firm called Kaisa. And I absolutely thoroughly enjoy fishing, hiking, just outdoor stuff, and singing. And so we have split the basics of the behavioral interview into the following subcategories. Preparation, doing your due diligence for the interview.
Okay. And then how to carry yourself. This is more of when you get in the interview, how are you positioning yourself and how are you angling yourself with respect to the other person?
Interpreting body language. So understanding how to physically give off the best impression and react to your interviewer's key signals.
Next, questions to prepare for, basically what gets asked and where do you find it?
And then understanding yourself and selling your resume, emphasizing your strong points as a way to market yourself.
And last, asking questions. At the end of the interview, what impression do you want your intellect to leave on your interviewer?
So to start with preparation, do diligent research on the company. Do more than just looking at the company's about page on the website. Actually inquire the ins and outs of the company. Analyze the product, the service, and get interested enough to develop some questions into wanting to learn more. Look through their service like a client, and then view it again as an employee to get a more whole understanding of the company.
Next, you have to evaluate where you're at. For whatever position that you're applying for, did you get it through a family member or friend, or like a majority, are you going in blind? You're trying to get something that maybe nobody has connections to before. And whatever your situation might be, one of the best ways to always find out what the interview is going to be about is to speak to people, and not just people you're familiar with, but people you don't know, because that's who your interviewer will be. It will be somebody that you are not familiar with. The more that you can practice and get over those mental hurdles of I'm stressed out, I'm going to be, awkward or confused with this person, better and more calm and controlled you will be in the interview itself. Try to reach out, and the more senior members that you speak to, the better. And actually, although it might seem nervous at first, in personal experience, those are the people that want to talk less about finance and more about life. Don't be scared to reach out to older people, and if people see that you have interest in the subject, they'll be willing to talk to you.
And now, this one may seem very obvious, but stay up to date on current events. No one will hire you if you don't know what's going on in the industry. Keep up with current events, read the Financial Times, Wall Street Journal, The Economist. Get a global understanding of the sector and prove it to show your qualifications. I was recently talking with an MD at Citi, and he told me all these smart social kids come for their 30-minute interviews, and it's hard to distinguish kids from one another. He says they look for ways to cut kids off the bat. GPA cutoff does that, but past that, they want well-informed people who care to know what is going on. He says, if you don't know your current events, then you don't deserve the chance to be hired. This definitely speaks volumes to say, know what's going on.
And last, remember, although this is bridging sort of into the interview itself, you have to read the room even before you go in. And whether this is a Zoom call or in person, the same questions still apply. Are you talking to a junior or senior member at this firm? Are they on the West Coast or the East Coast? Does that matter? Are they a banker, trader, software engineer, associate, analyst? You need to figure out first who you're talking to, and don't be fooled by a specific archetype of person. These people are you have no idea what their personality is like. All that you can control is that when you're in the interview itself, don't react to those prejudices that you might have had before, and see what clues you might be able to pick out beforehand in their description or past experiences or life trajectory that might help you further identify with the person you're speaking to. So, in presentation, first, remember, everybody here, we are all college students. I know this shouldn't have to be said, but for example, one of my best friends was in the diversity pipeline for Evercore Investment Banking last spring. She had a great interview, nailed it, technical questions down the hatch, but she didn't get the offer. She was confused. She thought she did everything right, networked right, correct. She got a call from an ND after that. And the MD said, we really wanted to put you through, but you were just a deadpan. You were just, a blank slate, a wall. We couldn't even talk to you, past your technicals. You got everything right, but you can't hire somebody who we don't know. Feel free to be open. Feel free to give those senior employees that are interviewing you a glimpse of, what their life was again in college. It's okay to be loose as long as you're being professional. Next, bet on your experiences. You all got to the interview if you're here. So they've had your resume. You should never feel like you're not qualified. Don't lie. You'll never need to. If you think that you don't have the right experiences that qualify you for a position, go back through all of your internships. I've gone back multiple times through the experiences that I've had, not just internships, but volunteering experiences, awards that I've been a part of, organizations. Doesn't matter. Go back through and see, what can I pull from these that I haven't pulled yet? What can I say? What did I actually do that was concrete? You're most likely not going to be lying. And the more you keep turning and keep editing through your resume, the more confident you'll be just by sticking to that one sheet of paper. Your mind won't be all over the place looking for examples that you've never even thought of before. Try to stay controlled and believe in yourself.
Now, at the end of the day, these guys are looking to hire someone they want to work with for 40, 60, even 100-hour work weeks. My boss at Kaisa, half jokingly and also half triggered, says he spends more time with his coworkers in the office than he gets to with his wife, which is absolutely absurd, but definitely goes to say that everyone will prefer to have someone with a good attitude and always has a smile on his face. Tick that box by showing that you know what you're doing and can have a good time doing it. And then don't rush your thoughts. The way you present an idea is just as important as the idea itself. Take a moment to understand a question, develop your answer, then present it. The typical speech fillers as and like will bore and annoy your interviewer. Give them a complete, developed, and comprehensible thought that they can understand and want to inquire further. Compare it to how a president addresses a crowd. I implore you all to study inaugural addresses and look at each president's pace and cadence. A slow pace, powerful speech, and confidence will leave a lasting impression. And now, body language. This is going to sound very superfluous, but I promise you, this is one of the biggest telltale signs of emotions and compatibility. So, starting from when you sit down, keep your arms above the table with a straight posture and forearms down. Show that you are interested and present yourself with an open mind. Showing interest with your body creates a lasting first impression. And now, people get distracted. They fidget, tap at the table, look around. Capture your interviewer's attention by slowing down your speech and enunciating to help build interest and force him to process your answers. Keep your answers short but powerful by highlighting your best experiences in every question and leaving small loose ends to keep them wanting to ask more, encapsulating their attention. My interviewer at Kaisa was very impatient during our time together. I slowed my speech down and gave him some of my personal highlights to sell myself, and he started becoming more responsive. Study the person's movements while you speak. See what makes them tick, perk up, and become responsive and interested. Your goal is to deduce a reaction from your interviewer and want them to inquire further. Study what actually makes them do that and adapt during your interview. And now, for eyes, this one speaks for itself. Eye contact, no matter how seemingly weird or awkward, speaks volumes to a person's character. Holding eye contact shows a mutual respect and confidence in one's speech. You can give slight glances away to break and blink, but when you speak, you should always be holding eye contact with your interviewer. And finally, use your body as an advantage. Capture your interviewer's attention by emphasizing your strong points with arm motions, open and fluid. When talking about something in history, I like to take one arm and just spread it outwards to really emphasize the time frame, for example. But make sure not to overuse these as it can become very distracting. And so now for some example questions you'll receive. One you'll always hear is, tell me about yourself. No, this does not mean walk me through your resume. This means give me a brief background of yourself, tell me a snippet of your upbringing, how you got your values, and how it's brought you here, with a taste of what you want out of the future. Use your story as a wow factor that grasps your interviewer's attention, not just listing qualifications.
Next one is one that's I'm sure some of you have wondered, like, does this actually get asked in an interview? I've been asked this a handful of times, not as often as tell me about yourself, but it's pretty revealing in terms of how you can answer that first question. So what are your greatest strengths? This can't just be, I'm a hard worker, I'm motivated, I'm positive. Yeah, everybody is, or everybody can pretend to be. My suggestion is first take a breath before you're trying to prove your worth to yourself and look at your resume again. What have you actionably done? What are some of the things that you've actually accomplished to build a base of confidence? Then you can work off of that and get a little more specific. For example, you can say, my drive. I personally, as a transfer student, it's very easy to point, I was driven. My drive and my follow through to be able to work towards transferring to NYU and follow through after to get an internship in finance and then resulting to the interviews that I've had. You can other, specific words like reliability is a good one too, empathy, but although these seem like intangible items, if you can say a strength and then loop it immediately back to something in your resume that person can look at, it immediately makes that connection in their head, and they're more likely to empathize with what you're saying.
You're on
Shaq,
mute.
you're on mute.
I was muted. Sorry about that.
No problem.
Each firm identifies a specific set of values that they uphold in operations. Speak on your own experiences and tie it into these values. You'll typically find these on an about page or like a why we do what we do page. And so on top of culture and ethics, be honest. Say what you truly want to get out of working with this firm. Emphasize the uniqueness you have found by talking with employees in your preparations, and show them what you've done your research that we displayed in the first slide.
Okay, and last, why X career? This is going to be followed up, or this is actually going to precede the third question most of the time. Again, base this on your resume. Obviously, if you got to the interview, then there's a match for the employer, but maybe the role isn't something that you feel personally qualified for. It might be something that you're not immediately familiar with. Don't worry about it. Again, base this on your resume. Point to the things that you maybe know are going to be continuous, like, oh, I like building resumes, or what kind of projects are you working on? Are they long-term projects? Are you in an industry where you have to react quickly to news, and have you done that before? Stay within yourself, stay within that one sheet of paper, and let yourself shine through the experiences that you've already had. I feel like I'm hammering this in multiple times, but this is the secret, guys.
All right. Well, I know I would love to hear a sample answer from one of you guys for each of these questions, if you wouldn't mind sharing. And before we do that, something I would like to emphasize is that please feel free to raise your hand at any point to ask questions. I neglected to mention this in the beginning, but we really want this to be casual and inclusive, so please feel free to ask a question at any time. But for now, we'll hear some of your answers.
All right. So I'll answer the one I talked about. So when I hear tell me about yourself, I'll give you basically a rundown of what I like to say. So my name is Abhishek. I come from a small town in Georgia called Alpharetta, where I was raised by my parents to be kind of an everything kid. They had me playing all sports while also maintaining my grades. So they really had to set a high standard for me. And as I was growing up, I really found my passion in like lacrosse. So I wanted to start my own business just because it was something I loved. I started stringing lacrosse sticks for my team, and it ended up spreading, growing by word of mouth, going to other high schools around the area, and then eventually going national, shipping orders for personally strung lacrosse sticks in Maine and Arizona. So it kind of just branched out everywhere, and it was something I absolutely loved. So that kind of taught me that going to college, I wanted to go into business and particularly finance. So coming here today, I'm really looking for a job that can bring me those same endeavors and responsibilities that I had running my own business, while also giving me a chance to work with others who really want to solve problems, look for long-term solutions, and really grind through and work through different tasks. So being only a sophomore in college, I understand that I'm young, but I'm also looking to gain this experience with others and really push things through to the finish.
That's great. I love how you really turn everything into a story. It makes it really engaging. How about Nick? Can you describe some of your greatest strengths? I know you already touched upon this.
Sure. I'll describe some more strengths for you. So as I mentioned before, I would go about it first addressing my drive and follow through. The fact that I didn't get into New York University the first time around. I found throughout multiple times in my life that there's a continual theme of hard work. My parents instilled in me that even if I can't figure something out the first time, that if I put the time in and I sit down hard enough and really passionately care about it, things will work out for me because I'll have worked harder than everybody else at the end. The fact that I stuck through, I think, shows my follow through there. Let me think of better examples for you guys. I point out my reliability. I point out the fact that my internship has renewed me twice. That was an actionable item that happens that, shows that I can handle a responsibility in a relatively scrutinous environment. The fact that I'm one of 3 interns means that there's visibility for me for the whole entire firm. I've handled that well. I've messed nothing up, and they've renewed me twice and raised my salary twice. Don't mention that during the interview, but the point is, think through how things could be braggadocious, but not too braggadocious. You don't want to go into salary numbers. You don't want to go into, anything that seems like extraneous. Last one, I have empathy. I have empathy just through ingrained in how my family taught me. I've worked for years and years volunteering, understanding really when I'm on a team, what's everybody's needs, what's everybody's responsibilities. And that came to fruition big time, not in a business example, but in a classroom example last semester when during our final project for my OrgComm class, my team really hit a rut for the first time. And for days and days, we couldn't figure out how to work with each other and how to work around the problem. I met with everybody individually from that team for about 15 to 20 minutes and talked to them about what they were trying to do and what angle they had about the company that we were trying to consult for. I came back the next day. I told everybody what everybody was looking for and how, although they thought it disagreed, it actually aligns. We ended up with an A on the final and an A in the class. And I'm just glad that people were available to me too. It's all right to be human during these, as I'll explain in the next slide. But even if those, your technical answers are going to sound drilled, very official all the time. The behavioral interview questions, it needs to sound like you are a person, like you're talking. I'm veering into the next slide, so I don't know if we're ready to go, but.
Yeah, I just want to say thank you. And to all of the audience members, I did put them on the spot here, so they just came up with these answers as we were moving through the slides pretty quickly. So exactly like it would be in an interview, I guess.
Okay, so this is the biggest thing, in my opinion. So selling yourself, how everything in your resume should be something that you're able to speak on. And I've interviewed a bunch of you for SOF here, and I'm glad to see a lot of familiar faces. But what was I looking for in that interview? Well, it was really what my employers were looking for when they hired me, is how I kind of based it. First, when answering your questions, be sure to tie in those resume highlights. Those are the exposure that the person has seen of you. It's recency, it's recall. The more that you can talk about, the impressive things that they saw the first time, but the fact that you can articulate these thoughts and that they aren't just, blinded items that you were able to slide in. And, maybe the suspicion would be, if you can explain it correctly, that you didn't actually do what you said you did. Make sure that you stay within your resume and make sure that you really drive down the points that you've stated. Don't be too humble. I mentioned before, don't cross the line between being braggadocious, being unreasonable, but you've accomplished these things. The only way that you're going to stand out and differentiate yourself is if you can, with composure and with confidence, show that you can brag. It's a weird thing to say, but you need to show these people your worth. You need to show them that you have confidence in your abilities, and you need to show them that you can say it measured. Last, This is the most important one. I think this is one that never really gets talked about. And I didn't really, until I started emphasizing this, come into any of the opportunities that I've been able to have. And it's focusing on relationships. You know, how many of you built? How many do you maintain? How do you build? Talking less about the qualifications of the position and more so with the qualifications of being a human has opened up 10 times more doors than I originally thought it would. You know, being human in these interviews, showing that, you know, I've been able to work with others, that I've been able to keep those relationships, those long lasting relationships. In business, that's really the end of the day what's most important. Who can you connect to who and how quickly? And how can you use relationships to better yourself while mutually benefiting somebody else in the industry? If you can show that you can master your relationships, you can show that you can maintain them, that's an undeniable plus that might give you an advantage over what anybody else has said in the beginning.
All right, so welcome to the end of your interview. It's your turn to learn as much as you can. Everyone asks these standard questions like, what does a typical day-to-day look like for this position? Or what is the culture surrounding this firm? You need to differentiate yourself in every way possible by making these questions unique and thoughtful for the interviewer across from you. Modify these questions by asking, in a typical day, what is the makeup between collaborative and independent work? See how this is framed for an insightful response, which forces your interviewer to give details on what parts of their day fall under each category, typically forcing them to indulge you with a day-to-day schedule. Be specific. What does this firm do to promote employee camaraderie and wellness? See how I just posed a question about culture? Get personal. Go deeper than the firm. Find the actual person. How has working at this firm shaped or adjusted your life and career values? What parts of the workday do you look forward to that will always make you smile? Finding out about the person will make a more wholesome connection that can leave your lasting impact on the interviewer, because after all, that is the goal of your behavioral interview, for you to leave a lovely, lasting impact.
All right. Before we move into the activity, we'd like to open it up for any Q&A that the audience may have. So feel free to raise your hand, type in the chat, or even simply unmute yourself, whatever you feel most comfortable with.
Hi guys. First of all, I just wanted to say thank you so much for putting this together. This is really cool. My question is on the third question of the example questions, which was basically like, why do you want to join our firm? When I like think about answering this question, I always think of it in two ways. Like, should I focus on like the super tangible things that the firm does, like you've done X, Y, and Z, or should I talk more about the culture of the firm and like what I've had in conversations with other people? Because like I'm still super uncertain about kind of the best path to go with that.
If I could answer that, thank you for your question, first of all. I think a mixture of both, but I've found that unequivocally the best way to answer that question is through, you know, talking to people. Like I mentioned earlier, to talk to people you don't know. The most confident and the most home runs, you know, hit answers that I've had with that is from having conversations with people, 30-minute coffee chats with people at the firm, and asking them, both professionally and unprofessionally, what the firm is like. And you'll be able to craft from that how your values align with the values of the people that work there, and it'll almost answer itself. So I really encourage everybody to talk to people. That's where a lot of like the material of these questions is going to be answered. I think a good mix between the two, 50-50. They definitely want to hear about culture more personally, but probably 70% want to hear about, you know, how much you know the business. If that makes sense? Like as people, we all want to hear, you know, how much we relate to each other, but they want to see that you can articulate the mission of the business and that it aligns with what you actually want to do.
Definitely makes sense. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I actually had a question. You guys kind of talked about like how to kind of connect your strengths back to your weaknesses and just kind of how to, or just essentially how to play that up. However, I did want to ask, like usually they ask the question of like, what would you say like your weaknesses are? Like what are your three weaknesses? what is like your best suggestion for giving an earnest answer, but then also not trying to, completely slander yourself?
Good question.
Yeah, that's a great question. So, personally, since my goal in every behavioral interview is to make a human connection, I always try to be as honest as possible. So I know, of course, you don't want to make yourself seem, worse than you want to come off as, but when you're honest, so personally, I'll answer that question with typically like, I tend to be a little too intense, and I disregard other people's schedules because I want to stick to a time frame and get things done. So just saying that, like that can come off as a big negative for me. So don't cut off after you say your weakness. Say it, and then build off of it to say how you're improving yourself. So I come off as intense, and I tend to disregard people's schedules, but I've been getting better with communication, finding out or making connections and relationships with people to actually know what their time schedules and timeframes are looking like to make a more reasonable thing that fits in with their schedule. That shows improvement through there. So even though you admit to your weakness and you build that human connection, it doesn't come off that way because you're showing that you're going to fix it sometime soon.
Thank you.
Sorry, we got a question in the chat about the relationships point. If I can just answer it quick. It's a really good question.
I'll just read the question out loud really quick in case anyone didn't see it. So you mentioned talking about your relationships and how many you've built and maintained. How do you work this into your answers, or which kinds of questions could you answer with talking about relationships? I know everyone can read it, but there you go.
So the answer on a high level is any question. And let me give you some more specific questions. Like they ask you a team building example. What's an example of a good team? What's an example of a team conflict that you were able to solve? It can be answered on really any question, but the issue is like how to show it, as you were asking. Stories, short stories, 30-second stories, anecdotes that you have from the workplace are great. I think mostly that I don't want to steer you in the wrong direction. The point about mentioning that you can maintain and build these relationships can be shown, when you're showing a positive for, this is a project that I work on. This is a team that I worked on. What did you do at your job? You can throw into those answers, when I answer, like, what did I do with my firm even? I answer that I've had relationships with IPs that have extended beyond projects, that I've worked after hours on the models that they're working on, just going through it hand in hand with them, that I've spoken and maintained relationships with, portfolio CEOs that we have who ask for advice on certain transactions. And I don't know if I can outright answer your question, how to specifically insert it, but keep bringing up people, rather than just your work. I did this and I worked on this deal, or I increased this many interactions on the page. The more that you can mention people in your interview, but still sound articulate and still include, numerical data, that's how you're able to show it through, indirectly through showing that you can articulate everything at once. Does that make sense?
Yeah, thank you.
Hey, this is Adam, and I know that I've been asked some questions in interviews that really catch me off guard. I was wondering if any of you guys could share an example of when you kind of got asked a really out of the blue question and how you went about answering that.
Adam, that's a great question, and I would say that for the most part, my interviews have been pretty standard, but I did get one that kind of took me off guard, which was, where do you see yourself 10 years from now? Which was like kind of shocking to me that I actually like got that. But so again, what I said about like pausing, really thinking out your answer. Of course, you don't want to stay silent for like 30 seconds. But yeah, pausing and then giving out a complete thought was always the greatest. So you tie in some experiences from like, tell me about yourself. And so how I answered, where do I want to be 10 years from now, is, so currently I'm doing a lot of work to go through a route in banking. I'm building relationships with people in various investment banks, even getting some ideas and networking through PE firms and people just in and around the industry. And what I've been finding is that there's no definite answer. And so I want to be at a place where I can make, I can consider my coworkers and people in the office as friends and be working through these projects as a group project in school, not as something that feels like a drag. So I want to, of course, ascend the corporate ladder, pull as much responsibility as I can, but I also want to do that in a way that displays my own attitude and my own opinion in the workplace. And that's for positivity, relationships, and really just building these connections with the people I'm working with going forward.
Sorry, if I can just hop on that for like 30 seconds. Unlike Shaq, I've been frankly like whip smashed with some really, really whack questions during my interviews. Stuff that I was not prepared for, more on the technical side, but the best ways I found to deal with them are, situationally, can you not answer the question, first of all? Can you answer a version of the question that shows that you can articulate the thought? If you don't know how to answer, the question specifically, if you don't know a specific detail of what they're talking about, but can show a similar thought process. If you don't know, like, I know this is verging into technicals, but this is how I can explain it. Like, if you don't know how prepaid expenses move through an income statement, but you know how depreciation does. You know what I'm talking about? Like, answer a question completely, but, maybe it's a different question. Still showing that you're articulate. It'll annoy the interviewer, but, it's not going to kill you. So damage control, damage control, damage control. Don't outright say that you don't know it. That's the literal worst thing you can do. Try to play with yourself and keep the standard advice is keep answers limited and have them ask more questions about it. But make sure that you can answer something, even if it's not exactly what they asked for.
Awesome. Thanks for sharing that, guys.
That literally happened to me yesterday, like, and it worked out. So we're
Hey, I also have a question about these standard questions that we talked about here, like tell me about yourself, and the others. Since we all kind of anticipate these questions and we kind of think about our responses ahead of time, something I'm really conscious about is like not making it sound too memorized. So do you have any tips for like making these responses sound more natural?
Yeah.
Going through them?
Talk to people. That's the most candid advice I can give. I've told my story to like 20 different analysts, investment banking analysts, like that I didn't know, like that I just connected through somebody else. Like I asked if I can share my story and ask for feedback on it. Like scary to think about it that way, but like they will give you an honest answer and they'll tell you what you need to omit, like what's extra fluff in there and what you can cut out. Like totally, like they do not mind anybody that, whatever job it is. You can say, hey, like, could you just listen to my tell me about yourself real quick and, see if like, you resonate with it or not. Yeah, they'll absolutely say yes and they'll absolutely give you an honest critique.
I want to add on to that also. So I know like a typical way to prepare for these standard questions is drafting out responses. And I would say you can do that. And then once you start refining it, you may turn it into like a college essay, as in you're going through, you're seeing what words are the most powerful. You're making it as like great on paper as possible. I say completely scratch that informality. Keep it human, keep it conversational, and that's what makes it more of a back and forth, which really sticks out to your interviewer. If you if you try to make it too powerful with like the vocabulary you're using, it's going to sound rehearsed. No one comes up with a word like amalgamated on the spot. That just sounds weird. Keep it like combined. Keep it informal, keep it friendly, keep it fun, and keep it positive.
I had a question about weaknesses and when dealing with those types of questions. For example, if an interviewer asks, when was the time you failed or didn't do as well, somewhere along those lines, do you have any advice on how to make sure you're being sincere and honest, but not twisting your weaknesses into strengths?
Yeah. The most important, I guess, like, not all of you are professional failures, so the easiest thing to do is reach to an obvious failure first. But that might not be apparent. Usually a good way to do that is perception versus reality, I think. Like, for example, in transferring, I've had to go to another school that I originally didn't get into. That's the first failure. I've looked into that and what weaknesses did I have there, in my high school career that didn't allow me to originally attend the school. Maybe you don't get the internship that you want right away and you're doing something else for a summer. What might have allowed you to do that? You don't want to get too in your head about your own flaws, but like Shaq said, like, you should not have to turn your weaknesses into strengths. You should have to turn your weaknesses into sounding a lot, better than they actually are. Like, actually choose your weaknesses. I think everybody in finance is smart enough to know what's bullshit and what's not. Just definitely, like, analyze past times in your life that you might not have come through all the way, but that aren't like complete faults about yourself. And I don't think anything is a complete fault. I haven't had that question ever asked me in all the interviews I've done, so I can't really, from experience, say anything. I don't know if Shaq, you can, but.
I also have not been asked that, but I will say, like, I know it's, I guess, as people who, of course, derive pleasure from success, which I'm sure is all of us here, it's hard to think back on times that you can legitimately say you failed, and maybe maybe it's hard to think of it. Ask your parents. Your parents definitely know so much more and remember all these things about you than you can imagine. So they will definitely come up with an answer and give you one, and they will also be completely willing to tell you how you've grown from it. And they'll love that too. Tell them I love you after. It'll be perfect.
Any other questions? If not, we will transition into our activity. Final chance. I'll let Nick and Abhishek share the activity, and then we'll break into breakout rooms and complete it together.
Can we?
Let me just I'll put it in the chat box, because since we'll go in breakout rooms, you won't be able to view the screen. So if everyone can pull it up on their own computers. Please let me know if you have any problems with the file.
Sweet. So we're going to be running this just as like we were just doing, kind of answering a couple interview questions and a little case study at the end. And we're going to split you out into breakout rooms, and you're going to work through these among each other. As in, you'll give an answer to the question, and then your group members will give you feedback on how to improve it, just to get a little practice going to end the session. And so, yeah, we'll be putting a message in the chat off of each timer, just so we can help you guys know when it's time for the feedback, when to switch, when to move on to the next question, just so we can stay on schedule. But yeah, Amber, I think we're ready for the breakout rooms.
You should be getting put into breakout rooms shortly.